Hello and welcome to the Temple Tankard Tavern. I am Jim, aka Argent Wind, and I am your host for DM&D Chat, episode number 25. We are today talking about characters with character. In other words, both player characters, how to help yourself as a player get more into character and more ways to make characters fun for you and everyone else at the table there. And then for DMs, of course, talking about your non-player characters and how to make them more interesting for the players to interact with and more fun for you as well. Because nothing can kind of stop a game in its tracks more than just bland characters who just aren't interesting or who don't do anything special or are unique. Now, there are always situations where a a stereotypical player, your Joe Dumb fighter kind of person, can be still very, very fun, but it's in how you play them. It's in how you use their characteristics and everything else. And so we're going to be talking about various ways to spice up your characters, both as a player and as a DM. Okay. So we'll hopefully have some people jump in here. And as always, if you have questions, throw them into the chat. Get in here with any comments or questions you have to kind of spice things along here. So first of all, what makes a character interesting? A lot of times it's going to be sometimes what makes them unique, what sets them apart from others that are similar. You can have the exact same fighter built with the same weapons and the same base class, or if you're talking about a space game, the two pilots or two engineers. But what makes them unique are the little things. Sometimes it's the feats that you choose, if that's an option, or the skills that you choose, the specialties that you pick. Your weapon choice, your equipment choice, are some of the obvious things that make you different. But then there's things like personality or manner of dress. Like if you wear something unique about your character, you always wear the color red, or you always wear a certain hat. It becomes sort of a signature thing for that character. They can come up as something that you can remark upon as a DM for your players, calling out those things that are unique about them. And as players, the NPCs they run into and what makes them interesting or different from everyone else they see. So sometimes it's just a matter of literally a quirk or a mannerism. um, do they have a certain are they freakishly tall or very, very thin? Can be an appearance base or some sort of a tick that they have in terms of a nervous tick, or something that they always like, they're always smoking, or they're always chewing on a piece of hay, or always chewing gum or eating candy. All of those things are little things that kind of make someone more real. We all have our ways of being different from everybody else in terms of maybe how we dress, how we wear our hair, how we do our facial hair, if we have that. Uh, um, so again, thinking about that in terms of your characters, or for DM in terms of your NPCs, that helps them feel more realistic. It helps them feel like actual people that your players would interact with, or for your players to interact with each other, knowing a little bit more about them. If you know that your person always wears the color purple and you want to get them a gift, then handing them a bouquet of violets, or a new cloak that has a purple lining, or purple gemstones, or any of those kind of things where you can know that about the character, and it can help foster an interaction that feels more personal, that feels more real, and gives you those opportunities for role play that are meaningful and have a grounding in what makes that character unique or interesting. Um, uh, Kind of expanding on the idea of quirks, the idea that you have a certain mannerism. If someone is very much formal and stoic and they never move, putting yourself, when you're playing as a DM or as a character, putting yourself in a certain posture or a certain way of looking at someone there, that can really make that character come to life. And so you don't have to do anything drastic, but if you notice that this person is always standing very stock still, this shopkeeper is very formal and very much he never blinks, he never takes his eyes off of things, or they're kind of all over the place and very chaotic and strange, and or they have a very flowery way of speaking, certain vocabulary you use. Those are all ways to make that character unique in a way. I don't necessarily need to talk about voices, but we are going to spend a little bit of time on voices here, a little bit here, because you don't need to be a voice actor. I want to stress this right now. You do not need to do a crazy array of voices, but there are some things that you can do, and we're going to get to that in just a little bit. Um, so when you're making a character or a DM, when you're making an NPC, think about what sort of interactions you want this person to have. If you know you're going to have an adversarial thing, this is going to be someone you fight, then having them be very forceful or cruel or just very someone you want to punch the face of. If you make them very pleasant and nice, they may just go, "Why would I attack this guy?" That can also lead to some interesting interactions where you have a very pleasant bad guy who's very nice and very soft spoken, and then suddenly turns on them. Great interaction here where all of a sudden that person does something that makes the players feel something. They feel that betrayal. They feel that change. So those mannerisms what unique quality about them can really help drive the interactions that you have with your players. Like if you are a player and you're making a character, knowing what your character their fears, their interests, all of those things help drive role playing opportunities, either with your other with your fellow players or with those NPCs. So having those, it doesn't need to be an exhaustive list of things, but even just a few specific details that you know this person has this sort of an interest. So they'll interact with these opportunities. Or when they have a bit of downtime, they're going to do these kind of things that are a little bit different from everyone else. So it gives characters depth, it makes them interesting, and it makes them feel more real. Um, nothing's more nothing kills a character interaction more than someone who just doesn't have anything interesting about them. Now, before I go too far down that route, that can be what's interesting. There's been some characters in books that that in books or even in movies and that where their blandness is sort of their defining characteristic, and that can be a very fun thing if it's intentional. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about those mannerisms, those quirks, those things about them that make them unique. Make them intentional. That way you're making a choice, you're sticking to that, and it sets them apart from your normal persona, your normal character that you play every day, as opposed to the one that you play in the game. Now, there's some fun things to think about there in terms of what those mannerisms could be. If you always like to crack jokes, well, having a list of terrible jokes to tell. If you think of one, write it down and have your character use it. Ways of using like crazy metaphors or weird quotes from things. I had a character at one point there where I was totally the uh, um always the dry humor dad joke kind of person. And I literally went to online and just had just a pages of terrible dad jokes or somebody who always does puns. I some people hate puns, some people love them, but they will always add something to the experience if you can throw those out there. We joke about there being psychic damage from the terrible puns that come out there. It still adds to a fun interaction, something that livens the session and can really it sometimes can derail it. So as a DM, you may need to rein that in a little bit, or just find a way to sort of like that's enough. You only get one more, or um, or in the case of some games that involve like inspiration mechanics or special bonus dice mechanics, something like that, where those kind of in character quirks or mannerisms, you can reward those with something that, hey, that's perfect. That's um, totally in character. Here, have a bonus. Um, and then same with your NPCs. Again, for when you're making these things here, knowing that this person always cracks jokes. knowing this person is always going to be over the top excited or very stoic and very sort of bland and terrible, that makes them different from everybody else. So those giving those that depth really helps drive some interactions with your players, and players with each other even. Okay, so let's shift over to talking about voices. I'm not recommending that everyone go out there and use voices, but there could be some things that you do that are very, very simple and subtle. You don't need to worry about like I need to learn all these accents and all these crazy vocal gymnastics in order to become a character. If you can pick out an accent or two that you can do, that becomes very, very something you can settle into. If you are intentional in your world building, where you say that everyone from this region has an accent similar to this, remember, however, unless you're playing in a real world setting, our actual real world setting there, your accents don't need to be perfect. There's no reason they would be. The people from when I talk about the elves from Scarlos in my world in Avarice, they all have sort of a Russian Germanic sounding voices. They aren't actually Russian. They aren't actually Eastern European. They just have a voice that sounds like that. So even though I'm not a perfect linguist that can do voices, when I talk about from someone there, I can actually settle into that sort of an accent where they become it's more real. And then in Southern Garvon, in my world, they have Southern accents. You can kind of settle into that Southern drawl, and you can use varying degrees about that. And in both of those cases, I didn't change the sound of my voice, just the accent. The other is true as well. You can take your normal voice, and by just talking up here in a higher pitch, you now have a different character, a different voice. Or if you drop your voice way down here, I have not changed my accent, but I'm now actually speaking in a different voice. So there's really no change in what I'm doing there. I'm just raising the voice, raising my pitch, lowering my pitch. And if you practice these things, you may find there's some other things you can do. My first real character voice that I intentionally did was my players have met him recently here was Kestarok and Thelanom. He was a kobold and he talked like this. I just put a very raspy sound to my normal voice, and that was his voice. I didn't do anything crazy. I didn't do anything strange. I just talked with a rasp. And that way he was distinct from me. And my fellow players always knew that when I was talking like this, I was in character and I was Kess. And when I talked like this, I was out of character talking as Jim. So really it became so if you practice it and just kind of and just try it out there and find voices that work for you, it can really help with that characterization. Some other ones, right now I'm playing let's see here, Sturel Revach. He is a bit of a dragonborn, but he has a very specific accent that is very strange and very specific to him. It is literally I took sort of a Germanic European generic accent, and I consciously made the effort to make my R's sound like D, so very, very strange. And it's very much of a matter of being this person. And a way you can do that is practice introducing yourself. Hello, my name is Therev Revach. And now you sort of have that crutch you can use to say, this is that character. Say their name in their accent, and you'll get it down. Antia Sciarla was my more of an Italian-sounding person who was a barbarian blood hunter, but he was a matter. He had a very more intelligent way of talking, and he was. But the fun thing about him is when Antius, he's a blood hunter, barbarian, when he would rage, he became Scar. And I just talked in a very mean, raspy, horrible, angry voice. That was him. Same character, two different voices because I physically changed the character and I just had made two voices for him. Same campaign, I played a fighter paladin Goliath. And all I did for him was drop his voice down as low as I could and speak in a normal voice. It was just my normal voice, but way down here. That's just what he was. And then when he got Uh, when he got injured, at one point he had a terrible thing happen with it was a plague city, and he got his throat and jaw messed up, and so I just talked down here, and then added a rasp and just talked like this all the time, and so it was the same pitch, the same no accent, but I just talked with more of a rasp, and so that way I didn't have to do anything drastic. I didn't have to go on and take an accent, just changing the pitch, changing the forcefulness. Now, my players, sorry here, I'll go ahead and do this because it's a perfect example of something I didn't really intend. It just sort of happened and then just became standardized. My dragon voice. I just take a low voice down here, but I add a little rumble to it. I just make sure that I can sort of add that little, like not only a rasp, but a rumble to it. And I try to draw out certain words. Now, doing that requires a lot of extra air. So you can't say long sentences, but you have to sort of take breaths a lot in there. So that's literally my dragon voice there. I just drop it down as low as I can comfortably go and then add that breathy rumble sound to it. So that's literally what I and just that kind of thing. And I will say, practice. I never, when I'm in the car by myself now, when I'm driving to and from work, I never have my radio on. I practice voices. I practice dialogue with my characters in character, either my characters I'm playing or my my NPCs that I'm running for. If I want to talk, if I know I'm going to have certain characters that are going to be in next week's session, I will kind of run through those voices in my head and just make sure that I can still do them properly. Some fun ones, talking with your teeth clenched to add a different sound to your voice. Doesn't do anything different, but yes, it is sort of a exactly dragon. It is sort of that the Dr. Claw voice. Um, and again, it wasn't intentional. It's something that sort of came out. But practicing those voices in the car, practicing when you're just by yourself or sometime, or just trying them out with someone and saying, "Hey, how does this sound?" You don't have to do a lot of work at it, but just enough that you can kind of slip into it fairly easily. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. Even just changing the cadence of your voice. If you speak in a very formalized manner and very intentionally enunciate things, you suddenly have a very different character. No voice, no change in my pitch, no change in my accent. I'm just now speaking in a very intentional manner that is specific to a certain type of character. So that is another way of doing things. So it doesn't take a lot of effort. And I will say there are a ton of vocal coaches out there. If you do want to get better at accents, if you do want to get better at practicing different sounds, there are some great vocal tutors out there on YouTube that have tutorials that tell you how to do these things. But it's always going to take practice, just giving it a try and playing with it. And so in the comments there, if those of you are there, just anything that you just kind of let me know, like if you've settled into different accents at some point there, and what some of your most fun ones as well. So again, you don't need to be a master voice actor, and no one expects you to be. I mean, we're all just doing this for fun. If that's fun for you, then go for it. If it's not, don't worry about it. It's something that it's intimidating. I'm not gonna lie. The first time I started doing voices and started running, especially as streaming, I was kind of nervous. But I've been doing it as a player intentionally for a while. My artificer in the game that I played with one of my players that's in my game now, he was intentionally a artificer, super high intelligence there with a southern drawl, and he was just Nils Pretzel, and I just made sure that whatever I did, I was very intentional in what I was doing. I spoke in a very intelligent manner and made sure that I had plans and tactics that I use all the time, and it just was a matter of me taking that and thinking in that way and just using that voice when I was intentionally working with that character. And then when I slipped back out of it, I was just me, and I could just kind of move in and out of there. But it allows your fellow players, and as a DM, it allows your players to kind of interact with someone who isn't the same person staring at them the whole time. If you're at the table, I actually find it was a little bit harder to do in person than it was online. I don't know why that is, but it's interesting if you have that same experience there out there. But for some reason, being online, it was just easier for me to do it. In person, I still tried to, but it was a little bit more tricky to pull off. And don't worry about expecting other people to do it. As a DM, don't expect your players don't go in with the expectation that your players are going to do this. But when they do, make sure you make sure you comment and make sure you like show your support of that. Make sure you like recognize that they're making the effort and that they are um doing great. I mean, because even attempting it is a really fun thing to do. And when they're making that attempt there, make sure you give them compliments on it because even if it's not perfect, it's still different. It's still something the intentional choice they made for their character, which is a lot of fun. We've had characters that had some really crazy sounding voices that sometimes were a bit annoying, but also it was absolutely something that was fun to interact with overall. It's just a really fun way of changing that up. One of my characters has a Romanian voice when he talks in third person, entertained with an acting background. Exactly. It's tying things to your background. Literally, the whole reason why Nils, my artificer, had a southern accent is because when we looked at the map of the world we were playing in, it was from the far south. So, okay, well, obviously he's got a drawl because he's from the south, and why wouldn't everyone down there be have that? Because southern U.S. that's a drawl. That's the way it goes. So I just kind of settled into that, and that became the character's sort of defining trait, but one of those defining things. Um, so some other ways to make your characters come to life. Um, Obviously, making them unique with characters with like in fantasy settings, you have other races. Knowing how your upbringing or your background affects your character can help kind of guide some choices in your role playing. If you are playing a human character, which obviously in a lot of games here, I'm not sure if you all have the same experience here, but right now, my party on Saturday, no humans. The party I'm playing with on Sunday, no humans. Um, and the comment is always made that, hey, I play a human in real life. Why would I want to play one in a game? Well, um, yeah, you may not like elves, you may not like dwarves, but one thing that can be is that you can use that as sort of. I mean, we hope you don't act full on like racist toward these groups, but at least helping to inform those things of like, ooh, an elf. I'm not going to trust them because they're an elf, but letting that sort of kind of build and say, well, you're okay for an elf, or you're okay for a dwarf, or you're okay for a half orc. Um, it's you kind of build those kind of things into your world, but then how does that affect your upbringing? I will say you need to be careful with that. I did play in a game, and Dragon knows about this one, where there was extreme racism toward a specific race, and the players made a choice to be that race, and it made for some very uncomfortable times at the table. So, as a DM, tr- hopefully you can kind of make the choice to avoid that level of things, that level of kind of discomfort with character interactions. But it makes for one of those things you need to watch out for as a DM when you're designing your world, um, and as a player choosing the characters that you make or the choices you make about if you don't like elves, be careful you're not going too far with that because that can lead some very uncomfortable interactions. And we're all here to have fun. So make sure that your choices don't make it unfun for you and everybody else. Yeah, exactly. I know it was not. We were told that there was some discrimination for a certain race, but the level it was like, wow, this makes it really impossible for these characters to be part of our party. So it again, that was a choice the DM made. You made to make that very, very clear. In my world, I've made it very clear that playing a goblin can have a problem. And I basically flat out said, goblins aren't a playable race, player character race in my world. just because of the nature of the animosity that people have toward them and they have toward other people. It's just not going to be someone that's going to travel with everybody else. Now they've met some NPC goblins that are okay, and there's that in the world, but it's an exception, and it's very rare. So keep that in mind when you're kind of thinking of those character choices. Your race can lead to some fun things, but also some difficult things, and so that's something to watch out for. But the idea I came up with was if you wanted to play a human that was raised by elves. Now, I want you to think about what that would mean. You have a family who, let's say you have an older brother who's 10 and you're a toddler who was adopted by some elves. That that elf at 10 is effectively the same level of growth depending on how elves are in your world, but they may be considered a toddler in elven years. And here you are at 2 being a toddler. And suddenly you go from 2 to 18 or 20, and that human character is now an adult. And that in that same time period, he's gone from 10 to 28, which is still isn't an adult for an elf. So suddenly this elven brother character who saw his little little brother, younger brother, essentially adopted, is now fully adult and ready to leave the house, and he's still not even an adolescent yet. So that's going to be a very interesting interaction or different or a background choice that could make for some interesting family interactions or some interesting outlooks on the world. Like the fact that this human, like his whole family never changed, and now he's out in the world, and you're just like, I don't understand people because I grew up and my brother is still a kid and I'm adult. Um, so like raising your dog as a biological child sibling, yeah, because the dog's not going to age, and the child is. And in a way, you might think about that as kind of how elves would look at humans as theirs. They just wouldn't look at humans as a way that like they age so quickly and they're gone. It's kind of like us raising hamsters. They come and go in the blink of an eye. Um, comparatively. So again, that changes your outlook for your character. Changes kind of your outlook in how they interact with other people there. So it can lead to some interesting choices in role playing and interacting with other people. It also can lead to different motivations for your NPCs. Those elves may just look at these, oh yes, these just insignificant humans, they'll be gone in an instant, and we don't have to deal with them anymore. Um, but at the same time, they also may really like the fact that they're just so chaotic and wonderful and so ephemeral, and so we have to kind of relish those interactions. Two same type of character, two different outlooks on how they might interact with somebody. Okay. Um, Another thing to think about is your personality, of course, how you choose to play your character. And alignment in D&D is can be somewhat helpful about that. It's been phased out of most editions of D&D now, but it's still a good way to kind of if even if you don't use it as a game mechanic, to kind of think about it in terms of your character and kind of your outlook. Um uh the idea of if you're lawful good, you you do good deeds, you help people out, you're not going to be cruel and terrible, and your word is your bond. You're going to follow the law in most cases. You're not going to be duplicitous and mean and horrible. I mean, although some lawful good can take that route depending on their personality, but your overall motivations are going to be for law and good. You're not going to harm innocents usually if it can be helped. You're going to follow the guidance of whatever organization you're part of. That's where that lawful good is sort of a fairly obvious one, but less obvious, like neutral good. You do good deeds. You help people for the most part. Neutral good is sort of the altruistic for no motivation. They just do good deeds because they're good people. Chaotic good, however, they have a totally different outlook there. They think we are good, but we are not bound by anyone telling us what to do. I'm going to do good things overall, but I'm going to beat the crap out of this guy because he looked funny at my friend of mine. I won't kill him because I'm not an evil person, but I'm going to beat him up because he decided to hurt this person, or someone broke the law. Well, they obviously need to be killed. Boom, they're a bad person. Kill them. So yeah, the idea of if you really you may have your quirks about things that set you off if you're chaotic good or even lawful good for that matter, but you have that overall good mentality where the evil side is the opposite. You're going to do things from a very selfish. Specifically, I want to make sure that I come out on top. And the ultimate selfish alignment is neutral evil. I don't care about what you have to say. I'm just going to make sure that I come out on top, that I get what I want. Lawful evil, I give you my word. My word is my bond, but I'm going to make sure that I come out on top within the agreement that we have. The letter of the law is what matters, not the intent behind it. And I may deceive you, but I made this agreement, and this is this is what we're going to go for. Whereas chaotic evil is just they're unpredictable. They want to destroy. They want to watch the world burn. Those and all of the things in between, having those elements, having the idea of I am chaotic neutral. I am just unpredictable. I might help someone. I might hurt someone, but it's all about whatever happens, happens. Um, and so you can kind of use those as a way to think about your personality. It shouldn't be your entire personality. Obviously, you're going to have your own things that are about you, but your personality is going to help you draw on what makes your interactions unique to your character. Um, However, I do want to point out this can lead to some problems. If you have people that are making a very specific choice, I am going to be an evil jerk. That's a hard person to have in a party with other people. I am the lone wolf who doesn't care about anyone but myself. Well, again, very hard to bring into a party because they don't have any motivation to be there. So you may want to have, if you have that sort of that mentality of, hey, what I say is what matters. I don't care about all you. That can lead to some very uncomfortable interactions between your party members. And so that works fine for an NPC, your bounty hunter character, your city guardsman who's like, do what I say or else. Um, you have your assassin character who's NPC who's going to do what they do. Um, that's where you run into the problem of if they are so focused on this is who I am as a player, this is my character. The idea this is what my character would do. As a big red flag for whole thing is because you do things that you know are going to upset people. They're going to cause a problem because that's just what my character would do. Well, you also need to be someone who's thinking about your other players, your other because if it leads to something that's not fun, you may not want to do that. Again, it's your choice. So even though you have an idea of your character here, you're not so stuck that you can't do something that's going to actually lead to more fun for everyone else and yourself too. Because nothing's more uncomfortable than players who don't get along. That's one of the hardest things in as being a DM. Maybe the hardest things when you have two players that just cannot mesh. They just have a hard time. And they're always butting heads. And it could be because one player's playing their character a certain way, another player's playing their character a certain way, and the way they're playing just doesn't work together. If you can help bring them together and kind of see that, or just, you know what, you need to tone this down. You need to relax on this. You need to, I mean, so talk to them outside a game like that. But it's hard. It leads to some uncomfortable interactions. Um, so now they're borrowing your mom's woodworking tools without her knowledge, and Flarmac followers steal your mom's tools from you. Now you spend your life hunting for a bunch of magically enhanced wood carving tools. That's a motivation. That's something you're always going to look for. And yeah, so the idea that could be sort of one thing that by handing that to the DM, that becomes a fun thing the DM can kind of sprinkle into the game. Here's something, hey, there's that thing you were talking about. Oh, hey, you got a line on this. So now you have by making a choice is I mean, it's somewhat silly, but I mean somewhat straightforward as that. You've now given the DM a way to draw your character into the story, to give your character motivation, and in a way that doesn't take anything away from everyone else. Now, it may be that, hey, I have a line on this. Hey, would you be able to help me get this thing that I need? And like, what is it? It's a magical set of pliers. What? Okay, sure. And it leads off to an adventure. So that it again, an odd interaction with the party, but it helps draw them into something that involves your character that isn't me saying, go do this, quest giver, take this quest, go here, return quest. Um, it becomes something that the players help drive the story. And as a player, by making that choice for your character, it only adds to the game, which adds to the fun. Um, Green Dragon here. Lone wolves are hard to keep in the party, both as a player, not playing the lone wolf as a DM. Yeah, I mean, a lot of times when you have players who are like, "I'm going to be the lone wolf. I don't care about these people." Well, then why are you in the party? As a player, why are you here at the table if you don't want to be a part of a group? Lone wolves don't. Lone wolves don't join adventuring parties. They go off on their own and do their own thing. So that's one of the things that as a DM, you kind of talk to them saying, hey, can we find a way to make you motivated to be with the party? Or maybe the party members themselves saying, hey, you're not so bad. You actually want to help us, don't you? And okay. If the player is willing to do that, to let their character start off as this heart of nails jerk, and then slowly move into where, yeah, I like these people, or hey, yes, I do want to help them. It can lead to some fun, but if it doesn't do that, if it doesn't go that direction there, it makes for a very uncomfortable time with the group. So keep that in mind. Um, and as always, communication is a big deal. If there's a problem because between players interacting, as a DM, talk to them. If if an NPC that you created makes the players uncomfortable, change them up. Don't use them or have them kind of take sidestep. Um, you want to, like I say, you make a character, you don't necessarily say something, oh, they're suddenly different. But maybe you set up a plot where that person has been kidnapped or killed by someone. And now the thing is, hey, you need to find their killer. But their replacement is a much better person that the players actually like. That could be something you do. Again, drives the story, makes removes a something that's not fun for the players, but in a way that makes sense for the setting. Um, yeah. Any questions you guys have or anything? We're kind of running long here and kind of taking this all in stride. But do you have any questions about how to motivate players? How to drive things on, or experiences you have? Go ahead and throw them in there, and let's keep this rolling because it's been fun. Um, so shade. Not sure I'm understanding what that one is there. So, um, context there. Oh, of course, yes. Um, yeah, making a villain they hate is yeah, that's a great way. Again, motivates the story there. Shade, being someone in my world, early on very early in the campaign, there was a serial killer, a changeling, assassin, sorcerer, who was a basically would just essentially her whole modus operandi, she would find adventuring parties or caravans or whatever, kill someone and take the place of that person until they could steal the stuff they want and then get away. Um, so that was her whole operation. Well, the opportunity arose where the Shade tried to get away with killing um, the wagon driver for a group that the party was with, but got caught. Led to a whole murder mystery. Then later on, Shade came back, killing off uh, one of the retainers of our paladin with the noble background, uh, and that led to some interactions with finding out that the retainer had been replaced, and then what happened to him, and eventually the retainer was returned because resurrection's a thing, or raised dead's a thing in the world. So, um, but yeah, it's making a villain who's bad enough that people want to deal with them. So yeah, even your bad guys, your NPCs you put in there, you can have NPCs that are kind of likable, that might be very pleasant, and have that sort of like, ooh, this is kind of chilling because this person is nice, but they're obviously evil. It's a very fun way to go there, as opposed to the despicable one you just want to punch his face in and put him in the ground. Two two different like mannerisms for NPCs that are meant to be antagonists of the party. So a great way to bring about NPCs that matter and that are different and unique. It doesn't always be the Snidely Whiplash twirling his mustache villain. It can also be that very pleasant intellectual person who wants to make sure that he gets his operation to be off the ground and you're out of the way, as opposed to the crazy guy who just wants to kill everything. So again, have fun with those motivations and make things that are fun to interact with. Even those bad guys can be still fun. Uh, let's see here. Oh, I missed one up here. Let's see. Oh, Dow. Growing up a half orc with a father that made him slaughter happy with Charlie with that horror. Uh, what, Dad wanted to be a pillaging barbarian. Are you giving away secrets there, Dow? Hmm. um, but yeah, the way your backgrounds and those things come out can be very organic or never come out. Keeping that a secret and having it little by little becoming something the party discovers, it can be a very fun thing for your characters. Some people just lay it all out there the time for time to meet in there, but some people keep it close to their chest and have to figure it out little by little. Or maybe the DM brings in something that, hey, see, this is someone from your past. Now you have to deal with it. And the party's going, what? What's happening? Again, fun ways of incorporating those unique elements of a character into the plot, into the events of the story. They can draw in the players and make them part of the story, make them part of the world, with each other, with the NPCs they run into. All that is very very fun. Having characters where their pasts or their families or their people that are important to them become part of the story as well adds depth to your characters. NPCs that get involved with the party, that become part friends with the party. Now there's a motivation to protect them, to go back and see them, to be a part of their story as well, and vice versa. So adding to depth to characters by just making those choices to interact with specific NPCs in a certain way. Um, some other, let's see here, any other perfect. Giving the non-chatty person the chance to ask a janitor questions to find out an object could help them conduct more during games. That's a great way. If someone is very reluctant, and obviously, giving them the opportunity to jump in, don't expect it. Don't make them do it, but giving the opportunities where, hey, they happen to be alone or with somebody else who's doing another thing here, but hey, Dow, you are with this guy here. Is there anything you want to ask him and you want to find out from him? Nobody else is around. What do you do with this guy? And so if they make any effort to role play with that, then jump in there and do it. But don't force it. Give them the chance, give them the opportunity, and they may just say, "Hey, what do you know about the situation?" Well, what I know is I don't think you should be here. You're in trouble. You're going to be in trouble if you don't leave here right away. Well, we have to know. We have to know. So that interaction can suddenly grow. And then if you get the opportunity after the game, especially, send them that little message of like, hey, that was really cool. I really enjoyed that. Um, and hopefully they'll get the message of this is fun. We'll do more of this. And so it'll help build that role playing reflex because we don't have it. We're not all professional actors, but the chance we have to interact in a way that drives on a story, that makes for that role playing moments there, that just will grow with time. The more they get into their characters, the more they interact with the world in character, and giving them more of those chances will help them become comfortable with role playing. People that are brand new to it don't know how to do that. Um, I mean, obviously, if someone is an adult who's taken improv classes and does public speaking, of course, they're going to have an advantage on that, but they may not understand the role playing aspect there. So, giving them the chance to be in character, talk with NPCs in character, is going to help them flesh out that person in their minds and give them that chance to really interact in character as well. Um, this is actually great. Question from Sora here. What do you do when two PCs have almost the same backstory but different races? You know, it's funny. When they make characters that are very similar, start finding the differences. I mean, obviously, they're different races, obviously, but they may bond in a way that, hey, we both have a similar situation. Um, but what makes us different? And helping to draw that out of them and giving them opportunities to discover that for themselves based on their own interactions, based on how they interact with other things, like saying, "Hey, yeah, you guys are both guards, but uh, you, I know you." Or you're both nobles, but the retainers might be different types of people. They may come from different backgrounds, obviously come from different races. So how their experiences differ can be part of what they learn and grow with in developing their character. So, um, so with those PCs that do have similar backstories, I mean, almost the same one, you can have people that are the same classes, but maybe one of them is more of a sword, like both fighters, both champion fighters, the most generic fighter there is. So maybe one of them is more of a heavy weapons kind of person. They want to use two-handed weapons. The other person wants to use sword and shield, or maybe one is more dexterous than the other one and one wants to wear heavier armor or lighter armor. So giving them a chance to kind of find those differences and see how they grow. Or the fun thing is that they are very similar, seeing how that makes them maybe bond. They may say, "Hey, we got a similar thing here. We got a similar way of doing things. Let's find ways to make this work for us." So that's something else you can do is again that development of character and the intentional choices we make when role playing and finding ways to make them stand out in a way. Very good question. Thank you. Um, yeah, questions out there. Well, while I wait, because of our delay here. Let me go ahead and kind of summarize and wrap things up here. So we've talked a lot about different characters and what makes characters fun and unique. And so again, we have things like mannerisms, what makes them, what quirks they have, what things that make them different from everybody else. Using voices. And it can be as simple as just changing the way you talk, to changing the pitch of your voice, to using an accent if you can, but helping you sort of differentiate yourself from your character so you can play the game in character as it's meant to be, really, for the most part. Um, Finding ways of letting your background, your choices that you've made in creating your character help drive role play, both between you and your party, with you as your NPCs interacting with the players themselves, and then interacting with each other. All of these things. It really does help with how to make that a more fun and unique experience for everybody. So those are the main things there. The last thing I will say um, is players that are crazy chaotic, or players that sometimes very, you talk about the lone wolf, but also the very selfish players that are like, I want to be the center of attention. I want to do all this here. Um, some people are going to lend themselves more to that than others. And if it's a problem, and talk to the players, talk to the player that's grandstanding or making it all about them. Try to find ways to come to terms with that. If it's causing a problem, again, the communication aspect is important. Um, Players that are being very chaotic, who are making things hard for the rest of the party. Now, obviously, chaos can be fun. Chaos can lead to some crazy situations you wouldn't have expected to happen, but it can also lead to things that are difficult. I always know the experience of playing that wild magic sorcerer. I love wild magic. It's so cool. until things go bad. And we've seen it happen where the wild magic kicks in, the fireball goes off, and somebody who's already unconscious is suddenly making death saves. That is a tough thing to deal with for the rest of the players. If I'm sitting there like I'm struggling, I'm like I'm on death's door here, or I'm unconscious, and the guy rolls randomly because they love that chaos, and it suddenly knocks me into potentially even death. That can lead to some difficulty and some difficult situations. So if that situation starts to happen, or that becomes a very real possibility, you need to let both the person that's initiating that wild magic chaos and the rest of the players know that this is a possibility. And are we okay with that? Now that may change in the moment. There may be some hurt feelings and maybe some issues. They didn't think about that, but there can be situations that lead to some difficult times with your party. So be prepared that if you're going to have that in the game and you'll allow that for the players, or allow this to happen, it's going to lead to some difficult situations. And in one case, I know it did. And I've seen it happen in other places there. It can also lead to some hilariously crazy situations. I mean, there's a reason why Ironheart has no hair. Um, the item he used knocked his hair off like twice in the same campaign. Um, Within like a couple days of each other there, and it just ended up being a running gag that he would not have any hair as a dwarf. Very funny. So, but that led from a bit of chaos that led to something interesting that continued forward as sort of a running gag or a difference in that character moving forward. And I've retained that moving from one campaign to the next. So, um, so again, I encourage you guys to, as players, to find what makes your characters fun and unique. As DMs, what makes your NPCs unique and fun, and then what's going to work together. So I hope that helps. I hope you guys have fun with that and go forth and make those crazy characters, those fun characters. And I look forward to hearing some more stories from you. If you have comments or want to come back and throw something our way in the future there, I'd love to hear it. But with that, we're going to wrap things up for today. I want to thank you all for being here, participating, throwing out things in the chat. And as always, if you wish to have specific questions answered in a future episode, throw them in chat here. Throw them my DMs in Discord. Again, the Tumble Tanker Tavern is always looking for new members. We are adding new games all the time. We have a brand new game that just started up last week. Fun new one, Space Cowboys. Um, uh, we've got a number of one shots coming up there in the next couple of months here. They're almost always in need of extra players. So if you're looking for a game, stop by the Tankard and the Tumble Tankard and join in and love to have you there. But with that, I want to thank you for being here again, as always. Thanks for hanging out at the tavern, and as drinks are on us. We'll see you again real soon. Take care. Bye, folks. That's the My Little Pony.